Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to our session this morning on onboarding solutions for a growth strategy. This session will be recorded and it will be sent out to you directly tomorrow.
Thank you, Megan, and good morning everyone and welcome. I'm joined today by Jane Pritchard of Infotrack and Chris Norman from Jumio. We're hoping that Rob McKellar will be able to join us from Slater and Gordon as well, but he had some technical challenges this morning, so we'll have to see whether or not he pops in halfway through. We're looking this morning at the onboarding process, and particularly the onboarding process as something that is essential to the client experience. Oops, that's not working. We talked through the client experience during some of the virtual user group sessions that we had, and I think I introduced this diagram, which was drawn from the LexisNexis University of Cambridge document about the client experience as a differentiator. And there were three things, or three paths that were recommended for people to take to try and truly improve that client experience to the point where it could be a differentiator between your firm and a competing firm. And today we're looking at these elements here. The differentiation between delivering a simple service and delivering a complete experience. The identifying of pain points that exist within that client journey and how to find solutions for those so that those pain points are eased out and again that overall experience is improved. And to look at how we can integrate different components that come into play during different parts of that journey so that that overall experience can be as optimum as it can be. We looked at where we should potentially take measurements along that client journey. And the key thing that we were really looking for were those points on the journey where the client's perception could change or where the action of the firm could cause the client's perception to change during that journey. And we proposed this type of sort of timeline right at the beginning of this. Obviously people are developing interest in the firm. As they gain more and more information to make their decision, they engage in a commercial negotiation. And then there's a decision point, at which point they decide whether or not to appoint or whether to appoint a competitive firm. We then move on to the client engagement and inception process, the transaction itself, and of course completion at the end. And each of these points were seen potentially as sensible milestones for taking a sense check of what the client was feeling at that particular point. Now, if we have a look at the client mindset at that point, at each of those points, what we're probably seeing, if we look at a graph from neutral to highly positive, that what we're seeing during the first two stages is a building of a positive image of the firm, because what we're hoping to do is develop that interest, develop that positive mindset to get to the point where the client makes a decision to appoint the firm in this haze of champagne corks and flowers. At that point, their perception of the firm is very high. They've gone through potentially quite a long and complex process to decide to appoint the firm, and their mindset towards the firm has grown and developed during that period to the point where they have felt confident in making the decision. Now, of course, after that appointment, we come to the very next touch point with the firm, which is that client inception process. And depending on how that client inception process goes, that can either call into question that decision that they made, if it is a poor experience that they have at that point, or it can validate that decision. And then what we have is this nice buoyant flow through of mindset through to the rest of the transaction. Whereas if we've called that initial decision into question, what we can see is that the mindset going forward can be less than 100% positive, and therefore anything else that might go wrong during that transaction could be viewed as a much more serious problem than maybe it was previously, or maybe it would have been had they been in a positive mindset. So again, inception is key to making sure that the positive mindset that they had when making the decision is carried through to the rest of the transaction. And the engagement process, as I say, is key to that. We don't want the decision to engage the firm to be the absolute high point of the client's experience with the firm. What we need to do is ratchet it up so that that decision is validated, and so that they feel very positive towards the firm as they go forward. So that's the basis of why we're looking at the client engagement process as a key part of the client experience. And I'd like to bring Jane in now and ask whether she feels that people place enough focus, or firms place enough focus on that client experience. Jane, what do you think?
Thanks, Simon. I'm hopefully dog and child free for the next 30 minutes. So let's hope that I've created my own bubble here today. I think your diagram sums up really well. Those of you on the call who know me will know that I spent 20 years in private practice trying to get this right myself in management of law firms. And I know this is a real key challenge, that winning a client can be the crucial part. It feels like the crucial part for a lawyer. And then what I would say here is what I've seen, which is essentially from client win onwards, it's more of a downward graph. Now, I know that lawyers, being one myself, have never not been under pressure in regards to that balancing act of delivering excellent legal services and customer experience. But right now in 2020, it feels like things have changed so dramatically. And our clients just expect us to be amazing, excellent, the best lawyer in completing their transaction for them. But at the same time, they do expect also that consumer experience to be excellent, because that's where the rest of their digital footprint is. So just because lawyers are delivering a legal service, a professional service and a professional experience, doesn't mean that they're not expected to deliver an excellent consumer experience, which is totally out of most lawyers' comfort zones.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right on that. Obviously, in the past, you could do the whole champagne and flowers thing when your client came to you and said that that you'd won the transaction and you'd won the matter. But nowadays, things are very different. Do you think that in these days of the remote transaction and the more remote relationships we have, that experience can continue to be improved?
Yeah. For me, the barriers are probably more obvious than the solutions. And what I'd really like to focus on, and I think what's really great about this webinar that's different from others, is we are looking about solutions, not necessarily the barriers. But as a lawyer, it can be incredibly lonely. And as a law firm manager, it can be an incredibly lonely experience trying to understand how to overcome barriers and hurdles, as opposed to actually dealing with the solutions. As individual law firms, trying to pivot that, understanding that the Law Commission last year, that they gave a nice rubber stamp and said, yes, we need to make sure that we can interpret the regulation appropriately for digital signatures, for example, and that's a barrier that's been, that has been around for a long time. But then looking at working parties, we have the Law Society as our membership organisation, the SRA in regards to regulation, Land Registry, the government agencies themselves, who are finding this incredibly difficult to navigate. But we shouldn't stop and wait for that. We shouldn't decide, well, actually, maybe the barriers are too great. And that's, it's going to be great that we've got Jimio joining us later to talk about how that happens outside of legal. But essentially, we just have to make sure that we're looking at opportunities. So that's something that we've done in InfoTrack. Those of you who know me will know that it's been a passion of mine throughout my legal career. I started a virtual law firm right at the beginning of my career. So if we're looking at what we've done in regards to ECOS, Simon, this is how we've delivered this in practice. And I know many of you listening will say it's unusual to hear Jane talking about high-level strategic stuff, because she's going to show us how to do it. So I want to have a look at what I've done since I've been over in InfoTrack in regards to these headers. So first of all, having a solution that is secure and is paramount. Of course it is. We're a law firm and we want to be secure in the way we deliver our services for onboarding for our client. But we also have to make sure it's both accessible and enjoyable. And I know that's really bizarre to have enjoyable as part of a header in regards to onboarding, but that's actually what we're striving for. So what have we done in InfoTrack to deal with this and our experience? We've actually looked at the whole data from a transaction and looked at everything you might need from your client onboarding experience, and actually flipped it all on its head and said, what do we actually need? Okay, our clients don't want to talk to us and feel as if in that initial experience it's all about anti-money laundering. That's a lawyer's language. It's not a consumer's language. So what do we need from the client? Making sure we only take that data once, and making sure we take it in a way that a consumer would expect to engage in a consumer experience digitally on other platforms. That's a lovely, nice big tick box. And then looking at predicting consumer behavior and evolving with it. So InfoTrack, with my experience of managing and looking after consumers, so not just law firms, but law firms' clients, we have that insight in predicting how consumers provide data, when, what time of the day, and how they skip through that process, and the actual pattern of providing data. And then making sure we evolve. So making sure we evolve day to day, hour to hour, week to week, month to month, so that continuous process is organic and it is best practice. The message overall here, I think, Simon, really is that we have to define what best practice is, because the Law Society, the SRA, the various different organisations here are leaving it for the legal industry to decide this. They're not delivering that on the plate. So this is a challenge for us right now. The last point I put on there is about the integration. And obviously this is a ticket webinar this afternoon. And integration is massively key in everything we've done here, to make sure that, again, anything that you do with your consumer is relayed back to the lawyer in the law firm as well, just to make sure the onboarding journey isn't a point solution, but it's embedded in your full ecosystem. So I'm just going to share, because you want something practical out of me today, or you'll be disappointed. Yeah. So I'm just going to share a screen to say how that could potentially look. So one of the products here, ECOS, Electronic Client Onboarding Service for InfoTrack. So what I'm showing you now, hopefully, Simon, can you give me a thumbs up? Are we all good? Can you see? Great.
We are good.
So I'm welcoming the two parties on this transaction. It could be any legal transaction, but what you want and what we need is a dynamic workspace that consumers can provide data on, which is unique to them, even if there are multiple parties in a transaction. So this would be a typical workspace. This is Yoda there on Coruscant at the Jedi Temple is being sold. And you can see that he's been through in one space, providing the initial documents to the client, to the law firm, verifying his identity with biometrics, but not in some separate discrete application or place, providing details of his address, and at the same time, straight on into Law Society forms and completing the information that's necessary for a transaction. Being able to skip through this and not having to feel that you have to do one stage which is disconnected with the rest of the process. And just flipping over to what Obi-Wan Kenobi is up to on the same transaction. As a law firm, you may not decide you need Obi-Wan's identity, because you might have acted for Obi-Wan previously in a transaction. And so for a compliance point of view, he is trusted with his identity. So for him, he'd be skipping straight onto questionnaires and signing up. So discreet, consumer appropriate and excellent, but also working in how the law firm would expect. And then just flipping back up to show what that looks like from a ticket perspective. So again, being able to track what's going on in InfoTrack, not just in regards to how far down forms are completed, so that you can have a look at those, but also going back into the transaction and looking at the stages of verification of identity, signing, all of those separate parts of the transaction, which are all embedded together silently and invisibly. So as good as it is for the consumer, as good as it is for the lawyer. Okay, I probably said that really quickly, but people probably expected me to. What I would like to do is introduce Rob, who's going to join us and then drop off again. I appreciate you joining us today, Rob. I know how busy you are. So Rob McKellar, he is Head of Strategic Growth and Residential Conveyancing at Slater & Gordon. And I know, Rob, that innovation is written right the way through your job title and how you live and practice. Can I ask you now how important you found the client experience practicing in a conveyancing market specifically?
Absolutely. Well, ultimately, the client, the customer's got to be at the core of everything we do. That's why we come to work. That's why our businesses exist. And tech that makes life easier for lawyers is fantastic, but the tech that really matters is that which makes the customer journey and the customer experience more enjoyable, easier, gives them that better quality of life, that better access to legal services.
And onboarding is not an easy task, regardless of which area of law you're in. And we've dealt with a lot over the years, but onboarding in conveyancing, perhaps the most complex, all these different parties, agents, clients, lawyers on the other side. How have you approached that challenge for the complete solution?
Well, I think certainly for the customer, it really is the most complex part, because whilst it might not be technically complex from a legalistic perspective, it's the part that the customer has to do. So whatever can be done to ease that journey, and in our case it's ECOS, really allows the customer to move smoothly through the transaction, because a property information form is really, really daunting to a customer. And for us, being able to guide the client through that wizard journey of each step on the online platform really, really helps. It makes for a much smoother journey for them, rather than simply being presented with a bundle of documents by email and being told to fill them out.
Yeah, and it must have been incredibly difficult, because I know that your journey in regards to consumer experience didn't start as a result of COVID and the current home working experience, but it must have been very difficult for you in the role that you're in to stay on track with all of this. Have you managed to do that? Your innovation brief, has it continued? Has it been interrupted?
Not interrupted at all. No, strategically, we have been very keen to pursue a strategy of offense, not defense, during the COVID period. And a large part of that has been tech. It's been innovation. It's been really serving the customer and making sure that while they're working from home, or whilst they might be furloughed, or in a position where they're unable to access public places, that we really reach out to them and meet their needs. And for instance, many customers will go into their workplace to print things off and scan them, and we've been able to alleviate that. So no, absolutely, it's presented us with challenges, yes, but certainly opportunities moreover.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, actually, mentioning the fact that our consumers, it's not just the lawyers who are in a difficult position to deliver. The consumers themselves would rely on services that also aren't available to them anymore. So that's fantastic. That's really great. I know that you've got to jump off, Rob. So if you need to do that now, can I just say thank you so much for joining us? I know you've had some technical challenges today, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Simon, can you do me a favour and show share the slide deck again? Is that okay?
I can. Wait one.
So what I'd like to do next is, we've heard obviously Simon introducing the concept of the experience in the transaction. Hopefully I've provided some information in regards to the solution perspective of that, rather than just the hardcore, how do I fit a piece of tech in during the current situation. And one of the solutions, one of the solutions that we have plugged into ECOS is some kit from Jumio, who are leaders in regards to verification of identity and onboarding. And I would like to introduce you to Chris Norman, who is with us today. And Chris has experience of the wider digital footprint globally that Jumio represents. So can I ask you, Chris, this global footprint with multiple sectors, do you think, everything you've heard and seen recently through InfoTrack's experience of legal, do you find this, that, other sectors have perhaps paved the way for legal? Is this a challenge that has already been faced alternatively?
Yeah, absolutely. Jumio has a huge global footprint. As you said, we are the sort of global leader in AI powered trusted identity as a service. So when we look at our consumers, our clients globally, there is a huge cross section, from banks to gaming clients to airlines to hospitality, customers such as HSBC, Airbnb, EasyJet. The list is endless from the sort of the top tier of businesses globally that use and utilize Jumio's services today. We have an incredibly powerful engine. We verified to date about 225 million IDs globally. Our footprint is massive. We can consume about 4,000 different ID types from over 220 different territories. So the engine we have is extremely powerful, and that allows your consumers to be able to process their IDs, their identities, through a very seamless and very customer friendly experience. Someone opening a bank account with HSBC, or someone wanting to gamble on the derby with 888.com, or even checking into an Airbnb, are very, very different demographics of people. Some may be 18 years old, some may be 80 years old. So Jumio had to create a solution that was very, very consumer centric. If it was going to be too complicated, it just wouldn't work. We wouldn't be successful, and therefore our customers and therefore your customers wouldn't be successful either. So we had to build something that was incredibly seamless, that was fast and accurate, and provided feedback to the user as well. Otherwise, they would just become frustrated and drop off, and ultimately that is a lost customer. Which, when you fought so hard for that business, you don't want to lose them at the crucial point.
Simon, I think we've got a slide as well, haven't we, that we can show the attendees in regards to, there we go. So yep. in regards to that Jumio reach, I think this shows it really well. Hopefully you can see that for those people who are attending. But the thing for me, Chris, when we were looking at suppliers of this technology to plug into InfoTrack, it felt almost as if what we were doing is providing our clients and the UK legal sector using Jumio that they could almost stand on the shoulder of giants. So if a client if HSBC are using this tech, and as you said, Airbnb or Disney or whoever, and this is the same tech that's now accessible not just globally to these consumers, but in the UK and into the legal market, without having to feel like it's different or a different part of the platform, just having that as an integration. Does that feel the same for you in regards to how, when you see all these different clients using the same tech?
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is obviously showing our sort of top line customers. But below this, there are, hundreds or even thousands of customers who are operating on a very, very much smaller level. So, the regulations, the compliance that the banks have to deal with, or the gamers or the airline industries, the tech is there. It doesn't matter who's using it, and they're all consuming it in the same way. And obviously the powerful nature of the likes of HSBC or Barclays, or anyone else that we deal with, that tech is extremely powerful. Those relationships we have with those customers are very close. But it shouldn't matter who's using it. Ultimately, the end user is you or I. And therefore we have to make sure that those guys can use it in a very simple, very user-friendly way. So it doesn't really matter who the ultimate customer is for us. They see the same journey from a Jumio standpoint. It doesn't matter if you're HSBC or you're a small two-man law firm. Ultimately the journey is the same, and it has to work for everyone. It can't be focused on banking or focused on hospitality or law. It is the same journey, and that's why it's so successful.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, surprising that what's happened here is, whereas perhaps government agencies have found it quite difficult to evolve and use the technology. They've kind of come full circle around now and said, we've tried to find our own discrete solutions to it, but for this kind of tech, we want something that has that global reach and is and can integrate, and isn't something, you know, that again, InfoTrack could have decided to make their own piece of kit to do this, but we chose to stand, you know, to use Jumio's very specific solution, because we know then that we can offer this out to Pritchard and Co on the high street in the same way as we can the same technologies embedded in Barclays. So that's been really important for us. And I think as well, just also what it provides, because having gone so far in this journey as Jumio, you've overcome some of even just the practical hurdles that you've overcome in understanding what lawyers need back, because we don't actually need to, a client doesn't need to feel like they've been asked for the inside leg measurement to use this technology. And I feel that sometimes that's how we do, you know, because we're so focused on AML and compliance, we can make our end consumers feel like it's an invasive experience. But using this technology and plugging in technology like Jumio makes it feel like it just isn't evasive, and it feels the same as it is if you're booking a holiday or you're doing one of these. Great. Okay, Simon, I don't know if you've got any other points you wanted to raise on that, or whether we should ask people in the audience, in the attendees, whether they have any questions they'd like to raise, whether they'd like.
Yeah, I think now is the time to ask questions. Now that I think we've gone through quite nicely what the technology can do for you. So any specific questions would be be a good time to raise them now. Megan, can you let us know if there are any?
Yeah, none have come through at the moment, but I'll give it a few more minutes.
So that particular experience was 100% perfect, and no one had any questions. We explained it very well then. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, again, just for me, it's been, and I've spent the last 6 months, maybe a bit longer, just with my head into verification of identity, the guidance, talking to the land registry policy, talking to the Law Society, and looking at what their experience is and what their expectation is of us in regards to how this kind of technology is delivered through the UK legal sector.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it feels like we are probably, for various reasons, the last ones to, you know, the legal sector. We are coming on after financial in regards to this. And part of that is maybe it is just because we are in this position where we are perhaps not used to providing a consumer experience, or it's not as consumer centric as it has been. Our professional services have not been consumer centric, and everyone on that chart there from Jumio are competing more in that consumer space.
And the expectation is now set. You know, this is not, you know, why should I accept a poorer experience from my solicitors than I get when I'm setting up my Monzo account? That's what I want. So there is an expectation set now, I think.
Yeah, and for us, everything we do at InfoTrack is, again, just looking at what parts of the user journey and the user interface that consumers click on first or second or third, you know, and we actually watch that to see whether whether our design is good enough to meet that. And in the same way for the lawyers are almost easier to support than consumers, because consumers just expect it to look and feel like Amazon or Airbnb. So, okay.
Yeah. Low levels of frustration, yeah.
Yeah.
We have had a question come through from Deborah. She asked, which law firms are currently using the InfoTrack and Jumio solution?
Oh my goodness, I'm not allowed to give you clients' lists. I would tell, we had, so on our, you obviously Slater and Gordon, Rob very kindly came on the call, and Slater and Gordon have embedded this, the ECOS solution for the past 6 months. We have, really what we've done is, because this is a change management piece that we did with InfoTrack, we have restricted the number of firms that we used it while we were beta testing it. And we're about to launch our V2, and our V2 has the Jumio solution in it. So from numbers wise, we have approximately 80 firms who have used this, but that's because we have a number of firms who of our 1,500 client base who we've actually prevented from starting on the ECOS journey until we had this new release for them. So that's what it is. We've seen what's really interesting about that as well. The clients who've used ECOS, we've tried to stop clients using it while we've been launching our new release. We haven't been able to stop clients, but we've also seen a graph like this in regards to numbers. So we can now see how the clients who have been using it, the immediate increase in regards to both transactions month on month, but also the speed in those transactions. So one of our mottos for this and one of our KPIs is that we expect an onboarding experience in conveyancing to be 2 hours as opposed to 2 weeks. And we saw that being met back in March. And since then we've done nothing but improve the product. So 2 parts to that.
Thanks, Jane.
Any other questions?
Okay.
None more have come through.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank Chris and Jane for taking the time to be with us today. I hope everyone enjoyed that. And of course, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to raise with either Jane or I, there are our email addresses. Please get in touch. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Well.